Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Bagger, I'm the founder of Car Dealer Magazine, and today I'm delighted to be chatting to the What Car team. Joining me, I've got Haymarket Automotive's MD, Rachael Prasher, and editorial director, Jim Holder. Good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, you guys have just done some really interesting data, some insight into what every dealer wants to know at the moment, and that's what sort of level of business is there out there? Now, we've been hearing a number of things. Some people I've been talking to today have been saying it's as low as 20% as normal. Other people are saying it's up to 50% or as high as 70%. What do you think that level of demand is out there? And I don't mind who takes the question first.
Shall I kick off?
Okay.
Jim, thank you. Thanks, James. Yeah, you're right. We have had some great data over the past week. I know that we've spoken about this before, but we run this survey on an ongoing basis. It's a sort of always on survey in What Car, and we've been doing it since the start of the pandemic and pretty transparently sharing that data, which perhaps we hadn't done in the past. But we've obviously been looking really closely over the last few days to see what's happening, that sort of shift in attitude since the announcement of lockdown Mark 3. Hopefully the final one. And it's been encouraging, and obviously because we've been running it for a long time, we've got the benefit of being able to compare that to the first week of the original lockdown, and indeed what happened in November as well. And on that basis, it certainly appears to be pretty encouraging. So one of the key questions is around timeframes. We've been running that through the pandemic around, essentially what timeframe are you looking to buy in? And at the moment, when we look at that next 4 weeks, so that immediate timeframe, and then those looking to buy within 1 to 3 months, it's about 45% of respondents who are saying they are looking to buy in that timeframe. Now, comparing that to the original lockdown in the first week of April last year, we only had just over 11% of consumers who were looking to buy in that time frame. And even by the end of April, and we were seeing that growth all the way through, but even by the end of April, that was still only up to just under 18%. So there are a few reasons to be cheerful, but that's certainly one of them. That kind of buying mindset seems to persist. And then one of the other questions that we asked that kind of supports that is whether or not respondents are looking to postpone a purchase as a result of lockdown. And again, I think this is a pretty positive response. So we're saying 46% of new car buying respondents are looking to postpone. So in other words, 54% are still intending to purchase as normal. And they're pretty comfortable with the different ways of doing that.
And how does that compare to lockdown 2, which we know was very different? I mean, some of the dealers I was saying managed to do pretty much business as normal as you can get, but decent levels of volume compared to 2019. Did you see the same thing in terms of respondents to your survey?
Yeah, I mean, November, I have to be careful how I phrase this. I mean, it's almost the lockdown that wasn't quite a lockdown in the way that it behaved. So although obviously a lot of those things happened, like retailers shutting, the fact that kids were still at school and there was a lot of normality, so we didn't see anything like the effect. There was a softening in traffic and in sentiment, but it was barely noticeable compared to that first lockdown, and indeed what we're seeing at the moment.
Thank you for that. Jim, I'm going to turn to you on this one. What are we seeing from consumers when it comes to buying online? I mean, this has been the huge rise, hasn't it, for our industry? So many dealers now offering this as a solution. It's the only way that they can do business at the moment. What do consumers think? Are they comfortable buying online?
Increasingly, absolutely they are. And again, reverting back to the questions we've been asking on this weekly basis, because obviously we've been tracking very closely the changing sentiment around that. It's absolutely clear from the data that more and more people are willing to buy online, and there's almost an exponential. Every lockdown exponentially grows the percentage who are more comfortable with it. So now we have around 43% of our audience from last weekend told us they are comfortable with the idea of buying online. That figure was around 35% back in October, and it has been growing from very, very low level back in sort of March, April time last year. So, you know, I think there's two things there. There's a mindset of the consumer and a willingness of the consumer to engage with those online channels, but also, you know, we have to recognize that the manufacturers and the retailers have invested heavily. They've actually proved quite agile in launching different services, and they are giving some of that reassurance that consumers need in order to engage with those channels. There's still obviously a long way to go, but the number is growing significantly and quickly.
A number of surveys that I've seen recently have mentioned that actually customers like to do different things in that car buying cycle online, and they like to do some things in dealers. Are you seeing a similar sort of trend? And if so, what are the things that they do want to complete at home, and what things do they want to do with the help of a dealer?
I think it's a very varied picture, if I'm brutally honest. You know, there are clearly a proportion who are prepared to go the whole way and do it online. And I think, again, that number has increased significantly as perhaps options have narrowed down, as lockdowns have gone on. There are some who just want to have, you know, a video tour of the car, a fairly well-established practice. And of course, so much more time efficient to be able to do that if you've got quite a long short list. There are some who want to go all the way through, do the finance deal, have the car either delivered or click and collect at the end of it without ever actually physically seeing it. You know, that still remains the minority. You know, the role of the car dealership is not in question here. But what I think is evident is that those online benefits are becoming more and more apparent to people who want to buy a car. And I think it's also apparent that there are different age groups where online buying really does appeal more and more. Certainly from our data, the most sort of open-minded to that sort of trend is the 35 to 55-year-olds. Actually, the youngest age group is a little bit more resistant to it, almost on a par, in fact, with the over 55-year-olds. But it's clear, you know, there is this group of people, online savvy, who are seeing more and more opportunities by entering that online purchase channel.
That is interesting, how those different age groups are more receptive or less receptive to online buying. Rachel, what do you think would persuade more consumers to finally do a deal completely online?
Well, we asked exactly those questions, which is helpful. The kind of biggest, well, there's two big standouts really. The first is a 30-day money-back guarantee. So 39% of respondents said that would convince them to buy end-to-end online, which is interesting because, of course, that is an offer that's been increasingly touted particularly by new players in the market. So that sort of reassurance piece is clearly very important. Test drive from home was 38% as well. You know, clearly that carries significant cost for dealers and risk, obviously. And then other options that came through, things like proof of disinfection. Obviously, that's a very peculiar to COVID piece. That was actually only 4%. But an extended warranty came in at 18%. So again, they all kind of speak around things that are going to reassure a buyer that if something goes wrong or they change their mind, then they've got options available to them.
Yeah, interesting, that 30-day, isn't it? I mean, that's quite a lot more than some of the big players are offering at the moment, and a big percentage of those respondents saying that would make them change their mind. What about click and collect then? Are consumers happy with that? Do they like doing business that way?
Yeah, they do. I mean, considering, you know, this is still a very new principle for the car industry, certainly, obviously not in broader retail, but across all the age groups, we had a 90% acceptance of click and collect as a good means of buying a car. And actually, when you look at the lower age brackets of 35 to 55, you've got a 95% acceptance that click and collect is a viable means of buying. And, you know, compared to perhaps some of those other pieces like a 30-day money-back guarantee or, you know, test drives at home, which clearly carries significant cost, actually the click and collect principle is a much more robust and sustainable business model through the pandemic. And I know there are, you know, question marks over how viable or right that is. But even beyond the pandemic, you know, is that an opportunity of doing business in a different way in the future?
It shows you just how important that click and collect is for dealers to continue. I mean, I know there are rumours at the moment that it could be one of the things that that might be cut, and we hope that that's definitely not the case. Jim, I think you touched on we touched on this, the postponement of purchases. I'd just like to go into a little bit more detail on that. Is there any certain kind of car buyers, and I'm talking in terms of used, nearly new, that are likely at this moment in time to postpone their purchases?
Yeah, certainly, again, back to the data, it's telling us a story around that. And that is particularly that nearly new car buyers are more inclined to postpone than new car buyers. And for obvious reasons, I would suggest, they want to see the kind of car they're going to get. Has it got any scratches on it? Is the interior in any way marked, and so on and so forth? You have an element of doubt with a nearly new car you might not have with a new one. But also, we're seeing sort of almost converse to that. But again, you can sort of post-rationalize it. Used car buyers are actually more inclined to want to buy now than any other type of buyer. And I think probably there is an element there of needs must. If you have the car in your sights, it is the only one, because used cars are unique. You want to move quickly. You want to get the car that suits your needs, and those needs may be quite urgent. So really, just 37% of used buyers talking about postponing against that sort of new car figure of well over 50% wanting to buy.
We'll come on to the search information in a moment and what you're seeing on the website. But I'd like to turn to Rachael and just ask about what the gut feeling is on a post-lockdown bounce. There'll be a lot of dealers out there very hopeful that we're going to see a massive rush to showrooms once again, like we did last year after the first lockdown. Do you think that's going to happen? And what's your feeling on that front?
Well, I'm an optimist, as you know, James. So I'm always going to lean to the positive. I try and balance that out. I think unless we see a really, really extended lockdown, and by that I mean one that's pushing well into the second quarter of this year, I can't believe that we'll see anything other than a very strong bounce back. So I think even if we're looking at retail lockdown through March as well, which is more likely than not at the moment, I would imagine that you're going to have this big pent-up demand, which is obviously what we saw last time, but that coupled with a plate change and a very key car buying time of year as well, along with all the benefits that have come from saving money during lockdown. It's a brutal situation. None of us would wish for it, but for a lot of car buyers, particularly that new car buying audience, of course, they have been squirreling savings away by not going out and not going on holiday and all the things that we know and well understand. So certainly my view is that as long as it is not too extended, when we come out of it, you'll have people who have got savings that they hadn't anticipated having, and also this kind of reward mentality. It's been really tough. We've likely, you've also got a new car buying audience who very likely will have been vaccinated or very close to being so. And I think there will be a sense of wanting to reward yourself, even if that's, just adding another £50 onto a monthly payment that allows you to get into a better car. I mean, we saw that last time, didn't we? This kind of upgrading of purchase, perhaps not necessarily encouraging a purchase that wouldn't have happened, but improving what you're buying as a result of that additional cash. So I would hope that's what we'll see. And I can't believe that that's not going to play out unless things are particularly gruesome. I mean, there's this sort of talk, isn't there, as well, of in a post-pandemic world, this idea of the age of socialization, where you are going to have this big sort of positive swing where people recognize all that they nearly didn't have.
Yeah, let's certainly hope so. It's very, very difficult though, isn't it, for car dealers at the moment? I mean, they're really stuck between an industry that needs to keep the wheels turning, but at the same time, government rhetoric saying that actually people should be staying at home for non-essential reasons and absolutely not leaving their homes. Do you think it's morally right for car dealers to continue doing business at this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very charged word, isn't it? What's morally right? And, we've seen throughout the pandemic, people's interpretations of what is right and wrong, differ wildly. And I'm very, very cautious about casting judgment on anybody, because actually I think You know, a lot of the problems we're seeing today around divided societies are people taking a very polarized view without really understanding the situations that people are in. I think it would be a very tough decision to say the car industry could no longer trade through the pandemic. And I think, you know, obviously that would be very tough on the industry, but I think there are plenty of car buyers out there. You know, Jim has talked to used car buyers, particularly with immediate need. I think it'd be really, really tough if they were not able to safely buy, which they are able to do, particularly through click and collect, over the next few weeks and months. You know, none of us know how long this is going to carry on for. So the idea that nobody can replace their car in that time frame feels, you know, that's a very, very difficult call. I mean, depends which news source you read, doesn't it? I mean, Chris Whitty yesterday was talking about, you know, not needing to introduce yet more rules. Actually, let's just follow the ones that are in place. I would hope that that's a line that the government can stick to.
Jim, it's clearly going to be quite difficult if that does happen, isn't it? I mean, to get hold of a car. I mean, we reported at the weekend that the private car sales are pretty much a no-no at the moment, and that sort of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, you can't really do a COVID-secure private car sale. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think dealers can continue to do the business that they're doing at the moment?
Yeah, I think it comes back to a moral judgment and a calculation ultimately, and I think that's probably one of the difficulties. Whatever your political allegiance, you know, one of the difficulties government has is walking that tightrope between public safety and the long-term impacts on the economy. And all I would say, you know, with all the biases of my position fully acknowledged, you know, the car industry. It's a high turnover, high revenue, high tax paying industry, big employment industry, you know, that operates from facilities that can be run outdoors, that can be run with social distancing in place, you know, relatively easy to sanitize the products, you know, no high footfall areas necessary, very easy to book people in and out of the premises. And I think if they're going to walk that tightrope, they have to do it absolutely fairly. And I would think that car retail premises should be near the top of the list for what can be safely run. And, you know, at the back of my mind, of course, I have that example of garden centres. And I you know, I do understand why they are allowed to open. And I understand, you know, the social benefit that people will take from being able to do gardening and home improvement. But I would have to put car retailers right at that end of the funnel of things that might need to be shut down. And I think, you know, if you're going to walk that delicate balance, I would certainly put them very near the late end of that list.
I still find it mad that we're even talking about these sorts of things near enough a year on. Jim, let's talk about something a little bit different. Let's talk about the traffic levels you're seeing at the moment. Let's give the car dealers watching this some hope that there are people out there searching for cars on your sites.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do proudly look upon What Car as a barometer of the car market, and we have done for some time. But what I think has been really interesting when we've been doing this polling since March is that we've had a pretty good track record of calling what's going to happen from the unfortunate collapse back in March, which made pretty grim reading, but much happier reading from June onwards. And we were able to see that sort of pent-up demand much before it turned into the reality of registrations, because we were looking at our audience. I think there are a few remarkable facts from our data. The first one is that through to the end of 2020, we actually ended up with more users on our website than we had in 2019. 2019 was a record year for us. We were very proud of it. You know, and if you talked to me in March or April of 2020, I would have painted a very bleak picture. But that comeback of people researching their next vehicles was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And we ended the year more than 5% more users than the year before. Now, if you'd asked me in lockdown, or certainly we were in a very deep tier system at the end of December, there was the prospect of more lockdown coming. You know, what would you expect to have happened on our website? I would have been pretty flat. Now, traditionally from Boxing Day, you start to see that build up towards March. And I was pretty nervous about what I would see. In fact, you know, quite remarkably, we were up 7.5% users from that period through to when lockdown was announced last Monday. That did dip, or at least slowed. It slowed to about 5% up throughout the course of last week. So still very, very strong numbers. You know, you have to remember there was we hadn't even heard of coronavirus this time last year. But there we were, you know, here we are now. We've still got more people researching cars. And that has started to lift again. From last weekend, we've seen another lift, and it's carrying on into this week. I think there are a few factors there. I think it helps that we're running our Car of the Year awards at the moment, which always provide a boost to us and the industry. But I think most significantly, and I think this is a trend, you know, we might come back to talk on, is that people are quite early in, a lot of people, a proportion of our visitors are quite early in their research journey. And we see that because the traffic in our top 10 lists and those sort of stories you might go into if you're still shortlisting is very, very high at the moment, 20% up year on year. And actually the individual car reviews, they're showing a little bit down year on year. So the sort of conclusion that we're drawing from that is that people are earlier in that purchase cycle. They have yet to get down to that shortlisting in quite the same numbers that they perhaps traditionally would, which of course is logical. When you're coming out of various lockdown situations, you might postpone a bit, you might be coming to it a bit later than normal. But what I think it bodes really positively for is what you talked about with Rachel, and that sort of post-lockdown surge, because I think we can see there are greater numbers than ever of people researching around their vehicles and future purchases. It's just giving them the chance to get out there and sort of see through that purchase.
I'd like to think that those people searching those top 10 lists are new buyers to the market completely. And actually, the fact that those have bounced is because these people are spending their lock time researching what they're going to spend their cash on at the end. But again, like Rachel, I'm an optimist too. Rachel, you've put a lot of investment into the new car buying tool, haven't you, over the last year? I mean, it probably helps you win your car dealer power award. I mean, the dealers are certainly noticing it. Tell us a little bit about why you've now started investing in wider marketing for that. I think you've got some radio adverts coming up.
Yeah, we have. Good spot. Yes, we have. Well, simply because we want to build on that momentum. You know, as I said just now, none of us would have wished for this pandemic at all. It's been absolutely hideous. However, what it has done is brought a digital market probably forwards a couple of years. And we were very fortunate that we'd made those investment decisions 3-4 years ago now, and relaunched What Car just under 2.5 years ago. So we were in a good position to move on that, essentially. So it kind of felt right. You know, we've had a lot of dealer support throughout the pandemic. We were able to retain, you'll recall, we put in a free offer during that initial lockdown period, which of course we're repeating now because we have this lockdown promise. If you go into lockdown, you don't pay if you're on our monthly plan. So it just felt right that, having been able to retain the vast majority of those dealers who came on for free during the summer, that we support them with marketing. And, you know, if we weren't in a pandemic, we would be looking to roll out marketing during this key buying period. Last year, we did some TV activity around paid for TV. And this year, we've had this brilliant opportunity to work with the Bauer Radio Network, in particular the Absolute Radio Network, with a sufficiently cheesy jingle, which is obviously what you've got to do on radio, created by our own studios team even. So we've been very efficient in the way we've done it. So it's really exciting to be able to support the dealer and the wider automotive industry.
Jim on lead vocals, I hope. Jim, let's just talk a little bit about new car launches for this year. I mean, I know your team are incredibly close to the manufacturers on Autocar and What Car, and getting that news. Have you heard of any delays? Are any of these manufacturers having to scale back their new product cycle?
Yeah, I think probably rather than scale back, they're pushing back. I don't think they'll launch less cars, but I think they may launch them to a different timetable. So yes, there have been a few stories, and definitely some of those fringe models, or perhaps you might even call them halo models, but the ones that are nice to do brand building but don't help the bottom line, they particular have come into the spotlight and perhaps been sidelined for a little while they try and keep the bread and butter models running. So sure, that there are some pushes back, but you know, we've still got a lot of very exciting cars coming through, and I think, you know, the way the car industry works, you don't tend to notice anything like a cut till 3 years down the line, because so much is already signed off or in motion. And of course, that's one of the things that will pull this industry through the pandemic particularly well, is that you know, it runs to a cycle, and that you can't really switch it off and on. It has to keep running. So we've got some really positive cars coming. I think, you know, if we're going to talk particular models, I think at the front of my mind is the Ford Mustang E, the Volkswagen ID.4. You know, that suite of electrified models really will be fascinating. You know, they are high quality cars. They're coming into a market that really has some strong competition now. And it's really interesting to see how the manufacturers they're choosing to position themselves, how much profit they're prepared to trade off against sales and market position. And you know, there is an opportunity there for brands to reposition themselves entirely in the way, you know, you might argue that Kia and Hyundai did with the Kona and of course the Kia, which we gave Car of the Year to. You know, they did competitively price it, offer an incredible range, and I think that has changed their market position already.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting to see some of those new cars hit dealer forecourts. Rachel, as we near the end of this, I mean, what are your thoughts for 2021 when it comes to new car sales numbers? I'm going to ask you to gaze into your crystal ball now and take in all your expertise and sort of try and give me some idea of what you think it's going to look like.
I'm not going to be boxed into an absolute number. I think there are too many things at play. You know, last year was obviously very, very difficult. I would hope this year is better, hopefully, notably better. I think it would be pretty catastrophic were it not. There are a lot of things at play. You know, we haven't obviously mentioned the B word yet, but thank goodness we start the year, you know, again, I said I'm an optimist. Thank goodness we aren't starting the year with a no deal situation as well. And I think we have to be enormously thankful that a deal has been achieved for the industry. And, you know, it feels like not a bad deal for the industry, that's all I'll say. So, you know, that is a relief, and hopefully that will also help to stimulate demand as we go through this year. But, you know, the reason I won't be pinned to a number is because there are just so many unknowns around the timeframes for this lockdown. God help us if there's lockdown Mark 4. I know it's, you know, not inconceivable depending how this R number and all the other terms we're very familiar with now as amateur virologists and pandemic watchers. You know, it depends how that plays out, doesn't it? But I would hope that we will be looking at a noticeably better new car performance than we did in 2020.
And you mentioned the B word there. It's definitely Brexit. Having that deal sorted is certainly one reason to be cheerful. Let's end on another. Can you give car dealers any other hope for the rest of 2021?
Well, you know, like I said, I think, you know, we've talked about this click and collect principle and the ability to carry on doing business. I think if car dealers are able to continue over the next couple of months, that will certainly help to take the edge off what could be a very painful year. But I do come back to that sharp return, whatever happens, when business is up and running again properly. I do absolutely believe we'll see a very sharp return. We saw it in June last year. All the data we've shared with you today, particularly the stuff Jim's talked about, site activity, suggests that there are an awful lot of people still researching in market, waiting for that point to purchase. And I would, you know, I would absolutely buy into the idea that you will see this combination of pent-up demand and reward mentality serving certainly the new car market very well as we come out of lockdown.
A good cheerful point to end on. Thank you, both of you, very much for your time today and for giving us that detail. Wish you the best of luck for the rest of the year. I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Great, thanks, James.
Thank you. Great stuff. So thank you ever so much to Jim and Rachel there. If you like more car dealer lives like this one, you can log on to cardealermagazine.co.uk and click on the live tab at the top of the page. I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me. Goodbye.